Okay, I think I'm just going to keep doing these, like working on them back and forth so that one can dry and I can be working on the other one in the hopes that that will keep the videos from getting too crazy long. Okay, so we put the color down on this one, and the only other step that there would be to give this that three-dimensional appearance that it needs to have. And the way I think I would go about that is maybe a little bit different than what might be expected. I'm going to use watercolor, and I'm just trying to decide if I should use pencil or something else. I think I'm going to use brush and water. And I think I'm going to go with just kind of like a small, for me this is a really small round, but for some people this might be a big round, and I have no clue. I think it's a 10. And I'm just going to go with my little watercolor set. Now, this started out as just really super cheap kids watercolors, and then as I've used them up, I actually put in my more expensive watercolor, I guess they're liquid. They come in little tubes. Anyway, they dry and you can re-wet them. I just refill it. And I have other watercolor sets, but I actually prefer this set, and I can't really completely explain why. I mean, I think part of it obviously is because they're more expensive colors, but I think another part of it is because it's so messy and so grungy that you never get like out of the tube true color. You kind of always get this hint of a mix, and I think they just look better to me for that reason. So my intention is to give it dimensions. So I want to have a couple of different levels. The first one being the inner levels, which will have less height than the outer level, which would be, actually indicating that it's on the wall. So I'm going to try to start out light and work my way to something darker if I need to. Now, over here I have mostly black, but in here I kind of have a greenish brown, I guess, is the color that's in here. I'm going to add just a little bit more brown to it, actually. So I'm going to start with this one. And when you're doing the drop shadow, or any type of a shadowing on a wall, you need to decide where your light source is coming from. So I'm going to have my light source coming from here, which means everything should have a shadow falling underneath of it. So this has a little bit of dimension onto the actual, this would be a solid piece is what we're kind of trying to simulate. So this would have a really light, whoops, it's important to not get the shadow down into or up onto what should be the piece. So there should be a light shadow there, and I may have to darken these as I go. I think this shadow will be smaller in width because the piece is, the ring itself is smaller, but then also because it's a tighter fit, so it will be a little bit darker because it's a little bit closer, so there should be a little more shadow. Shadows building up in that area. It might be the opposite. I'd have to actually put something on a wall and check, but I'm just going to go with my imagination. Here it would be, I think, the same tonal value as the first one, just a lot thinner amount of it. And then this one would be pretty small, probably about the same. They're about the same width as the one above it. And then this one I think would be lighter because it would be whiter. It would the shadow would have a lot more space to fade out on this one. Okay, so while those are drying, I'm going to do the other side. And this other side, they should be, in my opinion, a little bit darker, because this area will be a little more in shadow itself. So I'm going to add a little more brown to it and a little more green. And just a tiny little bit more black. And then I just need to get a lot more water. Okay. So again, I also think that this shadow would throw a little bit less in actual length. So I'm going to keep it a little bit closer. And I am letting it grow just a tiny bit with each one that I come down. Imagining that the actual piece itself is getting wider, so thus it should have more shadow, because there's more physical area to have shadow thrown, basically. I mean, it is physically bigger, so my assumption is it would throw more shadow. Now, because these are watercolors, they're going to be imperfect, but I think that that'll be all right. If I need to, I'll come back in with a watercolor pencil or a watercolor brush pen that has ink, something, and add a tiny bit more. Now this one is going to be, I think, a lot wider, just like it was at the top, but still pretty prominent in color. And you'll notice that I'm throwing shadows, but I'm not using actual black or even, straight grays, because I think there would be some color. But for this bottom one, which I think would be the absolute darkest and largest, I'm actually going to add in some blue. And then I'm actually going to tape down I'm just using a little bit of tissue tape. The reason I'm doing it is because my paper is curled a little bit, and I think it's going to make my shadows move a little more than I want them to. So now I'm going to put my shadow down here, and I've altered the color a little bit, because I don't want this one to have as much reflected color as it does just purely shadow. And I need to slow down, so I'm going to stop talking while I do this. And I'm trying to gradiate the depth of the shadow just a little bit, so that it appears to grow larger at the widest point that would be receiving shadow. And now I'm just going to go with water on my brush. So whatever color was already there, you have to be careful not to wipe your color away. And here I've just kind of let it fade out, and I'm actually going to get the color out of my brush. Oops. And then get my brush wet and kind of blend that away a little bit. And soften any of these edges that are kind of harsh. They can get a little bit stronger and more harsh up to the very edge, but not so much that you see an easily defined line. Because shadows are always soft unless it's a really harsh light. And this one I don't think would be really harsh. think I got it a little big, so I'm just taking some of it away. Okay, now I can see I want to darken most of them up again a little bit. So I'm just going to find a new little spot. And I'm just going to try to gently put in a little more color. Do have a difficult time because the texture is not real high, so my brush creeps up onto it pretty easily. I can see I'm not doing a really good job of keeping these the right length here. Oops, goodness. I'm so used to painting up on an easel now, from painting at night so much that I kind of can't seem to hit things properly where I want them. Okay, that one bugs me. And again, I think it's just that I want to soften it a little. And then I really need to do the same thing here, figure out where I'm at with my little colors. I think I'm going to add a little more. Oops. It might just lift. I may have to go to and use something like my Inktense pencils or something to, because it's just going to keep, I think, lifting on me, but we'll give it a go. Let's see what we can achieve here. I am by no means a watercolor artist. I know only what little bit I have taken the time to learn. And I'm okay with that. I love watercolors. They're absolutely beautiful. I truly do. But I have enough on my plate with my fascination with acrylics and oils. And unless I get, and a lot to learn still with them. And unless I get like really bored, I don't think I'm going to be picking up any new mediums for a while that I want to, you know, be concerned with trying to master, I guess is what I should say. I have taken quite a few watercolor classes, just small little classes that you can buy online, and you get access to the video for a certain period of time. And the reason, because I find that for whatever reason, the way I like to paint, watercolor artists and the techniques, some of the techniques that they use, not necessarily the working with their medium part. In other words, like I know that there's something called blooming that happens with watercolors. I know kind of what it looks like. I don't know much about it, nor do I know how to stop it or anything like that. I've just seen it mentioned. But I actually watch them and take classes because I learn what I consider to be more unique ways to work with acrylics and oils by watching the tricks that watercolor artists automatically sort of do with their own medium. And I think it has to do with again that I like to paint more wet on wet and more fluid. Anyway, I find very valuable, useful information that I can then turn around and use in my preferred mediums, which you know, are pretty much acrylics and oils. All right, I'm just removing this temporary tape that I put down, and I just kind of want to sit this aside and let it all dry and see what I think of it before I go any further. So I'm going to move this off. I have to put it somewhere where it's kind of level, and that's how my case gets grungy, because I don't clean out the little pools. But again, like I said, there's something about it, I like it a little bit grungy. All right, so for this one, oops, I'm running over my phone cord. I want to do a little bit differently than we did with the pink one, and in so much as I want this one to have some metallic and kind of a two-tone appearance, and I'm sitting here just kind of debating. I think I'm going to go with a little bit darker blue, a true blue, and then put the acrylic over that after. So I have one of my favorite paints, which is Daler-Rowney's System 3 Process Cayenne, or Cyan. I'm not sure the proper way to say it. I used to know because I used to work in the print industry, but I haven't done that for a really long time, and I can't remember the right way. Now I've just added a ton of water to it because I really just want to get base coverage, but I'm not worried about it being opaque or even. I just want color on here right now. And there's going to be several additional layers on this piece. So you can see that I'm talking like it isn't an art journal, but it is a painting. I tend to do that when I think about a lot of abstract work, because I do a lot of abstract work on canvas. But what I want to do is I want to have a start of color that kind of gets rid of that problem issue I was having with the inks lifting up. I thought there was a lot of wet paint there, but it was actually dried up paint. Hold on. Just getting a little more out. I have really neglected my acrylics a great deal since I started oil painting at night. So I just want coverage that I can then utilize. Drying everything, I decided I wanted to do a little bit more on this one, so I went ahead and sealed the watercolor just by quickly spraying it with hairspray and then hitting it with the heat gun again. So you didn't get to see that, but if you know, this way you won't wonder later how come the watercolor's not moving. So that's why I just fixed it temporarily in place. I need to make room. I'm at a point where I can't even find anything. I have so much stuff up here. So I'm just going to shove some things out of the way. I think it's time to revisit cleaning up my workspace a little bit. Because I don't have enough room anymore. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to give it's all the same color, but I want to give the wall one surface and the medallion another surface, and that also should help make this look like more like one solid piece. But really fast, before I do that, I want to add just a little bit of white, and I'm just going to do it with a little bit of acrylic paint. And some water. So I've got a little bit of white acrylic over here. I'm not using the gesso simply because I don't want this to be flat, so there's no, oh, that's not white. I don't know what color that is, but that's definitely not a highlight. It is actually white, but there's so much gunk on my palette that it's not white. So I need to get some white acrylic. Mention that it was time to clean up my studio. I don't think that's an understatement. What on earth did I do with it? Might be using gesso anyway. I thought I just tossed all of them back in here. The black is in here. Either it's on my table and I can't see it, which I wouldn't be surprised, or I didn't put it away and I don't know where it is. So we're going to use gesso. Never mind the fact that I said we weren't going to use it. We are going to use it because I can't find the white paint. Alright, I'm just going to put some out. Now I know I have ink all over my craft mat, so I'm just going to clean it up. I'm going to put a tiny bit of the fluorescent pink down, and then I'm going to add white to it so that I have a highlight color. And I'm just going to highlight a few areas. I'm going to come back in and soften that. Let's see. I'm going to make my highlights smaller than my shadows. So now I'm just going to rinse my brush out, oops, and just using water, I'm just going to soften them a little, hopefully a little bit, not too drastically. I think I got that one a little, I let it dry a little too long. That's fine. I'm going to leave it as it is. They actually look dull. I'm not sure if that's because the pink or the gesso or my brush water. I don't know. This isn't working out quite as well as I had hoped it would. Maybe I should have went a little slower. I think maybe it could just be that the neon is so bright, the fluorescent, that I just needed to use straight white. That, or I'm picking up the watercolor. I must be picking, maybe I'm picking up watercolor. I don't know what's going on. But it's definitely not as bright as it should be. But I'm going to leave it. And then I'm just going to hit it with water. I just have a spray bottle problem lately. And then I'm just going to take, make a kind of a soft puffy area out of my paint rag. I'm just going to dab at it because I kind of want it to be broken. I don't want it to be a really solid area of highlight. Alright, I'm going to leave it as it is. So while that's drying, and I'm going to get rid of it before it frustrates me because it's not what I wanted, Maybe it'll look better when it's dry. While that is doing its job, or its thing, we're going to work on this. Now, the first thing that we need to do is, I want to put gold highlights on this, but I don't want them to be kind of glaring in your face. I want it to almost have sort of an antique feel. And the best way I know to go about getting that is to paint pretty much all of the surface area. And I'm just thinking about whether or not, I don't think I have a foam, I don't have any foam paintbrushes. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wet a sponge, this ratty sponge that I keep in my studio for paint. If it'll fit in my water bottle. Yeah. Sort of, kind of. So I'm using this sort of scrubby side of it, and I've gotten it wet just right in that one spot. And I'm just going to gently spread gold around. I'm going to do it with something else along the very outer edge. Something that's smaller and that I have a little more control with. So it's still going to be pretty solid along here. I'm just turning it for ease for myself. Now I'm going to go with, if I can find it, I have a blender tool. And this is actually supposed to be used with alcohol inks. It's a Tim Holtz little blender tool, and you can use anything. If you don't have one of these, you can use just a makeup sponge. You just want to hold it completely vertical to the surface. I'll probably end up pulling this little pad off at the very end, but we'll see how much control I can get with this piece. And then I just rub it just like you would with the alcohol inks over the gold. I just wanted to do that on the inside so that I could get a little of the excess off. And hopefully I'm not going to be in camera, but I have to kind of see what I'm doing here. And this doesn't have to be perfect. I'm probably being a little more perfect than at my normal self, but I just don't want to get it on the part that should actually be the wall. That's the part I don't want gold on, because I want this to look like it's an antiquing effect on the actual medallion. You could also use, and what I would use if I had them here in the studio, are any type of an oil stick that is water mixable. You can actually use, and this is definitely going against the grain of typical advice, but you can use iridescent oil paint sticks. I have used them before and then painted acrylics over them. The only thing that you kind of need to do is you have to let those sit and cure for 24 hours. We don't have time to do that, so. But if you have the little metallic ones that are the water-soluble ones, you could use those too and then just spray them with a fixative or hairspray or something. Okay, and then I think that's pretty good. I've got most of the raised surfaces because that's really my goal, is to hit the raised areas. And this is the right orientation. So now we just need this to be fully dry. And I am going to, let's see, how is this looking? This looks pretty good. These both are wet though, so I'm actually going to dry everything and come back again. A lot of stop and start with drawing on this lesson. Alrighty, with everything dry, we're actually going to be doing the same thing to both of these, sort of, but we'll start with this one. I just want to put matte medium. I don't care if it's perfect, but I just want to knock down as much of the shine as I can from the hairspray that I put on, because it was matte before I did that with the hairspray. And I just want to make sure that it looks different than the wall looks different, or, you know, the wall, the background, whatever, looks different than the medallion. So this is the first thing that we'll do to try to get that difference. It doesn't, if you get, at this point, if you get the matte medium up on the medallion, it doesn't make a difference. In a minute, though, it is going to matter a bit when we do the opposite, which is we're going to make the medallion shiny. And we won't want to get that onto the wall. So we'll have to be careful then. Pretty much have gotten all of it. Oops. Okay. So now we are done with the matte medium, and we're going to go to using the, oh look, the white right here beside the paint palette. Oh my, oh my. So now we're going to use the glossy, and I'm actually going to see, do I have a good sized angle brush in here? Let's see what I got. I thought I did. Oh, I have two. So I have a short handle and a long handle. I'm going to go with the long handle. I prefer a long handle brush. So by using the angled brush, you can let the tip flare out, and you should get a little bit more control that way. I'm just going to put gloss medium down on my craft sheet and then pick it up, and you only have to be careful with the edge, and I like to do the hardest thing first and save the easy stuff for after. So I'm going to start by getting this edge done. And I know that the gloss medium will lift even the hairspray, so you don't want to go over and over and over that area where you have the watercolor. The properties of gloss medium are amazing and at the same time strange. It's very powerful stuff. So I'm just going to be quiet while I do this, otherwise I'll make a bunch of messes and mistakes. Now something's going on here, and like I said, the gloss medium, I think it's a hair or something. Gloss medium is so strong that it lifts it right off of there. At first I was going to cut this edge off. That had been my intent all along, but I think I'm just going to leave it because I think it'll be kind of like a little round tab. All right, so now that I've got the outer edge done, now I can go, pretty quickly and just make sure I cover everything, not have to go over the areas that have the watercolor too much, so I don't lift it up and get it moving on me. And then just need a little bit more. Hit all the areas that I have skipped over. Now if you're working with glossy stuff, the best way to check is literally just to tilt it in the light, and you can easily see places that you've missed. Okay, so I'm going to let this, oops, it's upside down. I'm going to let this dry, and we're going to move on to this piece. Now, one of the things that I learned from an artist on YouTube who I learned to do texture from initially was that if you want to preserve a layer of paint and be able to either rub paint off or use alcohol to remove paint, but you don't want to go down through one of your layers, the best way to protect that layer from that happening is to seal it with some gloss medium. So that's what I'm going to do, is seal the medallion itself. And again, you do have to be careful because you don't want to get a bunch of it on the outside. It's not imperative if you do, because we can put matte medium over anywhere that we make a mistake, but it's better if you try not to, because that's less you have to worry about later. It's less you have to work at removing, I guess is the best way to say it. So you want a good, thickness, because you don't want your gold to be lifted off. But you want to be able to, we're going to put another layer over this, and we want to pull that back. So now I'm just going to try to be careful, and I'm not always as careful as I pretend to be. I probably could have used the angled brush again. I'm going to work a little bit. I'm going to go a little slow here. I'm actually going to stop talking too. See if I can get this done. It's a journal page. It doesn't have to be perfect. I need to get out of painting mode and into art journaling mode. I'm just picking up excess from on the medallion itself. I'm turning and I'm doing it the way I'm doing it because I have the most control when I make a line with my brush, when I make a brush stroke in this direction. And you'll learn where, how and where. There's some junk in here. I don't know what it's from, but I don't want it on my piece. You learn over time, as you paint. The more you paint, the more you learn about yourself and what you do well and how. When I first started, I had no idea why sometimes I was drawing lines and they were, all, look like I tried to scribble them instead of making them straight. and why at other times my lines look nice and straight. And I think I overheard an artist saying that, you know, they were going to move something because they made straight lines going in a certain direction. I am very much that way. Now, there are some people who make a straight line no matter what, any direction. They're lucky. I'm not quite so lucky, so I do actually have to, you know, with intent, turn my piece I'm working on. Okay, so now we're really pretty much done at this point until this is fully cured. This one I feel like I didn't get enough in the center area, so I'm actually just going to add a little more. It's kind of started to dry, so I just want it to be a little bit more glossy, and you get that effect the most when you have a lot of product on. Now, because we're not going to do a whole lot of details on this, and because really our background kind of is our center, our focal point, we've sort of been building our focal point as we went along. I'm actually going to end here for today, and when we come back tomorrow, we'll do our final, because we're really done with this one. Except that I think the matte is just not quite matte enough. It's still a little bit shiny. So what I think I might do is we might dry brush this with some white tomorrow, or maybe dry brush it with some dark pink, just to get rid of any of that shiny effect. And then when we come back tomorrow, we'll work on that, and then we'll also complete this one, which will be to add another layer, this time in the teal. And then we're going to pull it back off carefully in some, to, you know, not to the degree it is here, but just so that we can get some of that gold to pop back up, and so that it looks aged. Hopefully it will look as if it was at one point in time it was gilded, but the color has come off. The gilding has come off, or it's worn off over time. And I think that's it. So I will see you guys tomorrow.